Okay, here's a video of the Real Sound 4.1 sound system and a little tutorial on how to hook it up and how to set it up to your transmitter. So the first thing that I'm going to go over is the connections. The sound system itself has regular servo connectors on it. The connectors are the aux channel, which is for the guns, the machine guns, and the throttle. Okay, the other connectors that you see, there's one called the posi start. Now that is the sensor which actually syncs to the motor when there's current going through it, and that is picked up by this sensor here. Okay, and it actually has just a hole in it. You could take your motor wire and run it through here, doesn't matter which one, and the best results are obtained when you move it away from the motor itself and the ESC. Make sure it's just out in the open in one of the motor wires running through it, and that plugs in. That actually plugs in here, lining up the colors. It does have polarity, so you line up the colors like it shows here to the posi start, and that's where the coil goes in. For test purposes, we're going to use a test switch which simulates the sensor itself. So the system comes with a test switch which can be used to set up the calibration, the endpoints, where you want it to start and where you want the full throttle to be, with just a simple program that you can do. But we use the switch for that, and we can use the switch for testing without running the motor, which is what that would require when the posi start is connected. Okay, so we're going to start by showing you the rest of it here, where we have two amplifier connection. Normally we have the Dean's connector for battery power, and then there is a connector that comes off of that harness that says amp power. That goes to, in this case, the first amp, as you see here. And then coming off the first amp, there is a connector that says amp with an arrow, and that takes the amp power to the second amp, like that. So if you had the second amp, which you do, you would hook it up there. That's where the power would come from. And then the screw terminals already have two sets of twisted wires on that roughly they're about 2 feet long, and in this case they're hooked to these speakers for test purposes, but that's where you'd hook them to your transducers and speakers for each amplifier. Okay, and the two amplifiers are tied together and synced together. The input signals sync together with this gray cable, which gets there's one connector on the board that links these two together, and each amplifier has a volume control on it, which if you turn it all the way down, it turns it off like a radio. You turn it on, and then you got the volume control. So both need to be on, and when you do your testing, make sure they're both on. I generally start out with maybe a quarter turn or so, because it's very loud usually on both of them. So we'll make sure these are up about a quarter turn. Okay, and during testing, what I recommend you do, based on if you have speakers or transducers, since you're powering two speakers or transducers from each amplifier, it's probably best to turn the second amplifier down while you're doing the volume adjustment. Once you get it ready to, to pull it up to the full volume, and figure out where it's the loudest without distortion, by setting the volume level. And once you have that, you can mark it. Somehow you can mark it, or there is a there is a dot on the dial itself, so you can mark, you know, what position that's in. And then once you get that established, you can do the same thing with the second amplifier. Otherwise, doing them both at the same time and running at the same time is hard to tell which one's distorting if you have that issue. So basically, you set it as loud as you can possibly stand it until you hear distortion. And I will tell you that at idle, you'll probably be able to turn it up all the way, but not necessarily when it gets up to full throttle. You may not want it that high because it may start to distort a little bit. So it does get louder as you get up to the higher RPM. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to show you the calibration of the endpoints next. Okay, one thing I forgot to mention, there is an audio cable that comes with it, which goes to this first amplifier. The first one that is powered comes from the battery that goes to the first amp. There is a 3.5 millimeter audio connector, and that has to go to the side of the sound box right here. There's a hole with a jack on it. So that's one other thing that gets put on here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to set up the calibration, the endpoints. So we take the test switch and plug it into the calibrate connector, like so. Okay. And the system is off at this time. Slide switch is off. What we'll do is we will turn on the calibrate switch. Okay. So when we turn it on, what you will do is count to 4 with the transmitter actually in the idle position, which means that you want to set your transmitter joystick exactly where your motor starts. Whatever position that is with the trim tab or with the joystick that your motor actually starts, that's where you want to put it. That would be your idle position. Okay? So we have the calibrate switch flipped up. Then we're going to turn on the power. Okay? I'm sorry, I should start that over because I didn't count to 4. We'll do that. Okay? So after counting to 4, you will put the joystick as quickly as you can up to where you want the max throttle sound to occur. In our case, we're going to put it all the way up to max. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, wait a couple seconds and then put it back down. Okay? Turn it off. And you can either turn the calibration switch off and then disconnect it. And as long as you don't use the switch again, it will remember those endpoints. So we'll pull the calibrate switch out. And we will put it as a test switch where the posi start motor sensor goes. Hold on a second. Okay. All right. And we power it on. Okay. So we will start the engine with the test switch like this. Okay, and you don't want to let it run too long because that sound does end if you don't start running the idle. Okay, as long as you start moving the joystick, it will switch over to the continuous sound so that it doesn't run out, because that startup sound will eventually run out. That's about half throttle. And And as we advance it, you'll notice some of the effects. You'll notice it's a very smooth transition. Okay, so we shut it down. Okay. So that's the operation. The other additional thing that I'll show you now, we'll turn it off first. This is the engine select jumper. In this case, we have a Merlin sound that has a whistle at the top of it, and then we have another Merlin sound with a different variation. So we will remove the jumper like that. Okay, power it back up. Okay, and it will have a different startup sound, and also the high-speed sound has some things in it that are a little bit different. Okay, so we'll hit the start button. Make sure our throttle's all the way down. We'll do that again. One of the other things that it has are the machine guns. So the best place to do that is anything above half throttle. If you go too low, they don't sound like machine guns, they sound like bombs. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so the machine guns we hook to your aux channel, which the endpoints usually in the aux channel are set 0 to 100, or however you want to do it, but you want to make sure that the endpoints are low enough and high enough to trigger the machine guns. And that's the basic operation and connection of the system, and it should work well, and I think you'll be very pleased with it. Okay.